When Grandpa called to say he couldn't wait to see me pull up in the car he gave me, I lied and told him I didn't have a license yet. That wasn't true. I'd had my license for almost 6 years, but the car wasn't mine. Not really. Not anymore. He sounded so proud over the phone, just like he had when he handed me the keys last summer. Graduating medical tech in a pandemic. Alexis. That's grit. I want you to have something solid. You earned it. It was a used 2012 Toyota RAV4. Solid mileage, well kept. He'd even left a note inside the glove box written in shaky ink so you can go wherever you want on your own terms. I thanked him through tears that day. But the next morning, Mom Susan Carter told me the registration would have to wait until we figured out the insurance. That turned into needing repairs, then emissions, then some DMV backlog, then silence. For months. Every time I asked about the car, I got deflection. We're just keeping it safe, she'd say. It's not going anywhere. My dad, Robert Carter, added once, never looking up from his tablet. Eventually, the car disappeared from their driveway. When I visited unannounced, it wasn't there, and neither of them brought it up again. I stopped pushing. I told myself I was being ungrateful that maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't ready to handle more responsibility. I was living with a roommate doing temp jobs in Portland while applying to every hospital within 30 miles. I could barely afford groceries, let alone car insurance. But when George Carter, my grandfather, invited the whole family to his house for Father's Day, said he was firing up the old grill making his signature apple pie and couldn't wait to see his girl behind the wheel. I knew I couldn't avoid it anymore. I hadn't been back there in over a year. Not since graduation. Not since I saw my name on the title he signed. Will Susan be there? I asked quietly. He chuckled. Of course everyone's coming. It's not a Carter barbecue. If someone doesn't bring coleslaw, no one touches. I agreed to come. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see the car again. I needed to know if I'd imagined it all. If I'd made something small into something bigger out of stubborn pride. I needed something real to hold on to. So I took the bus across town, brought a store-bought cake, and wore the same sundress I graduated in. When I got to Grandpa's place, the smell of charcoal and green beans hit me like a memory I hadn't earned. He was there on the porch waving his dog Rusty at his feet. Alexis, he called. There she is. He didn't ask where the car was. Not yet. I stepped onto the grass, waved back, and tried not to look at the driveway. I didn't want to know if it was parked there. Not yet. We were halfway through grilled burgers and corn on the cob when Grandpa raised his iced tea like a glass of champagne and said loud enough for the whole backyard to hear, "Glad to see you here, Alexis. And I hope the car is treating you well. That thing should last you a decade if you take care of it." The table paused. A few cousins looked up mid-bite. Someone laughed politely, but I didn't laugh. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might be sick. I looked down at my plate like it might offer me a script, but there were no lines for this part. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. The lie came quickly, just not from me. Mom, sitting across the table in a navy linen blouse, dabbed the corner of her lips with a napkin and smiled. "Oh, Dad, that's sweet." She decided not to keep it after all. Said it was too much to manage while job hunting. We've just been using it for errands in the meantime. No harm done. Her voice was syrupy, just the right amount of self-deprecating, like she was doing me a favor by explaining my absence. She looked around like she'd just solved a small misunderstanding. I blinked at her. That voice had soothed me as a child explained away bad dreams and teenage disappointments. Now it made my skin crawl. Grandpa seemed puzzled, but not concerned. He nodded, taking a sip. Well, long as someone's using it. I couldn't speak. I wasn't sure what would come out if I did. No one else seemed bothered. No one looked my way. The air buzzed with the sound of cicadas' forks scraping paper plates and a dog barking across the fence. Just background noise to a moment that cracked something open inside me. I felt 14 again, standing in the kitchen while Mom smoothed over something I didn't do with that same tone. The one that always made adults believe her first. I pushed food around on my plate. Someone passed me another spoonful of potato salad. I smiled, nodded, took it. But my heart was thudding. That car wasn't too much to manage. I'd asked about it dozens of times. I'd called the insurance company. They told me the policy had been placed under a new name. I tried to activate coverage, but I was told I wasn't listed on the title anymore. I'd even gone to the DMV. The clerk looked at me like I was confused. "Susan Carter's the registered owner," she said, tapping the screen. I never told Grandpa. I didn't want to disappoint him, or worse, make him think he'd chosen the wrong person to believe in. I kept hoping it was some misunderstanding that would fix itself, but it hadn't. And now my own mother was rewriting the story line by line in front of people who mattered, and they were nodding along. I took a breath, looked around at the table, and realized no one was coming to correct her. No one even looked surprised. Maybe they believed her. Maybe they always had. My father, Robert, sat quiet beside her, sipping his iced tea like it was any other Sunday. No eye contact. Just steady avoidance like he'd perfected it. For the rest of the meal, I went quiet too. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I wasn't ready to say it here, not yet. Not while my voice could still be twisted into something that didn't belong to me. But I was done pretending I'd forgotten. Done acting like I was the one who gave something up. After dinner, while the others started clearing plates and chatting by the grill, I walked to the far end of the yard and pulled out my phone. There in a folder labeled Documents was everything. The DMV letter showing the title, Transfer Screenshots of Emails Never Returned the Insurance Rejection, and one voice memo from 3 months ago recorded in my parents' kitchen. "Susan, that car. Alexis, come on. You're not ready for that kind of freedom yet. Let us handle it. You'll thank us later." I stared at the file. I hadn't listened to it since I recorded it. My hands trembled slightly, but not from fear, from certainty. They hadn't just taken the car. They'd taken the story. And tonight I was finally ready to take it back. The garage smelled like old paint and grass seed. The lights were off, but a sliver of evening sun slipped through the window, enough for me to see the shape in the far corner. There it was, the RAV4. My RAV4. It sat clean polished, even tucked behind a folding table in a stack of patio chairs. Like it had never left, like it had never been taken. I walked up to it slowly, letting my hand brush the driver's side mirror. My breath caught. I opened the door. It was unlocked and sat in the seat just long enough to close my eyes. The seat was pushed far back, too far for me. Mom always liked the extra space. I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat for a moment, hands in my lap, feeling the weight of silence fill every corner of the car. This wasn't about convenience. It never had been. They hadn't taken the car because I couldn't manage it. They'd taken it because I could. And that scared them more than anything. I stood up, closed the door gently, and stepped back into the house. The back screen creaked behind me. From the den, I heard pages turning. Grandpa was in there alone, sitting in his recliner by the fireplace, flipping through one of the old family photo albums. Rusty, his beagle, lay curled on the rug. He didn't look up when I entered, just kept turning the page, pausing every now and then on a photo. I waited a second before speaking. "Grandpa." He looked over and there it was. That same look I remembered since I was 5. Steady, warm. A look that had never once made me feel small. "Hey, kiddo. Everything all right?" I sat on the ottoman beside him. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "I think you should see something." He raised an eyebrow, closing the album. What kind of something? I took out my phone, opened the folder, and handed it to him. First, the email from the DMV confirming that the title had been re-registered under Susan Carter. Then the letter from the insurance company, the screenshots of unanswered emails, the denial from the agency when I tried to update coverage, and finally the voice recording. He put the phone on speaker and we listened together. "That car, Alexis, come on. You're not ready for that kind of freedom yet. Let us handle it. You'll thank us later." The room went still except for the quiet hum of the old fan. George didn't speak for a while. He just sat there, the phone resting in his palm, eyes fixed on the wall like it held something he hadn't wanted to see. When he finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "So you're telling me they lied to me? Changed the title, took the car, and told you to keep quiet?" I nodded. He clenched his jaw. Not in anger, at least not the kind that explodes. It was older than that, deeper. He stood, slowly ran a hand over his head, and turned toward the doorway. "Get everyone in the living room." I looked up now, he said, steady as stone. "We're settling this tonight." The living room still smelled like barbecue sauce and citronella. Wrapping paper and ribbon scraps from Grandpa's gag gifts were scattered under the coffee table. For a second, it could have passed as any Sunday night at George Carter's, but no one was laughing now. One by one, the family filtered in cousins with sunburned shoulders, aunts balancing pie plates and refilled sodas, uncles still wearing aprons from manning the grill. The chatter died when they saw George standing in front of the fireplace, hands folded behind his back. Susan and Robert were the last to enter. She had reapplied her lipstick, still smiling, still playing the hostess. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Everything okay, Dad?" Susan asked, lightly easing down beside Grandma Margaret. George didn't answer. He just glanced at me, then gave a slight nod. I stood slowly and moved toward the center of the room. My palms were sweating. My knees weren't steady, but my voice held. "I wasn't going to say anything tonight," I began. "But since the car came up and since my mother decided to rewrite the truth in front of all of you, I think it's time you hear the real story." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. I pulled out my phone, opened the file, and tapped play. "That car, Alexis, come on. You're not ready for that kind of freedom yet. Let us handle it. You'll thank us later." It was Susan's voice, clear, unapologetic. There was a pause, then a few gasps. A mug clinked hard against a table. Susan laughed too quickly. That's taken out of context, but no one echoed her. I turned to the TV on the wall, opened the screen mirror function, and tapped through each image. The DMV confirmation that the title was no longer in my name, the email chain with my unanswered questions, the rejection from the insurance company, the photograph of the car parked in their driveway while I walked to job interviews in the rain, and last, a short video I had filmed outside the DMV. This is the car my grandfather gave me. I haven't been able to drive it. I haven't even been allowed to sit in it. The title was changed, the insurance was blocked, and no one told me. Silence stretched across the room like static. I locked eyes with my mother. Her smile had vanished. "You wanted control?" I said. "So you made me look irresponsible. You made me look like someone who didn't deserve what I'd earned." She blinked rapidly. Her voice, when it came, was thinner than usual. "We didn't mean harm. It was for your own good. You were overwhelmed." George stepped forward, eyes not leaving hers. "Context," he repeated. "You stole from your own daughter, lied to me, and then sat here tonight pretending you did it out of love." Robert cleared his throat. "We thought it was best. She's still young." "Don't." George's voice cut sharp. "Don't you dare." He turned to me. "I'm calling my lawyer first thing in the morning. That title is going back into your name fully legally. If I have to drive you to the courthouse myself, I will. And if either of them takes one more dime related to that vehicle, they'll answer to me." No one said a word. Susan's eyes glistened, but no tears fell. Robert stared at the rug as if it could swallow him. Across the room, someone whispered to their spouse. Another cousin shifted away from the couch where Susan sat. George wasn't finished. He looked out across the room at everyone. "Let this be clear. I love my family. But I will not confuse silence with weakness. This young woman has worked scraped and carried more than most of you know. And all she asked for was a way to get where she needed to go. I gave her that. And what some of you did, what you allowed, was try to take it away. He paused, then turned to me again. You didn't let them, and I'm proud of you. The living room emptied slowly like a storm receding without apology. Paper plates scraped into trash bags, chairs folded and stacked against the wall. No one said goodbye to me. A few avoided my eyes. Most avoided his. Susan didn't speak again. She stood stiffly, gathered her purse and sweater, and walked out to my car without looking back. Robert followed behind her, quiet as ever. Neither one of them said goodnight to Grandpa, and for once, Grandpa didn't say it back. I stayed behind, still sitting near the fireplace. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the ceiling fan and the tick of the grandfather clock George had fixed more times than anyone could count. He lowered himself into the recliner beside me. For a while, we didn't speak. I never wanted it to come out like that. I said softly, "It needed to..." He answered. Sometimes the truth waits, but eventually it has to come out where everyone can see it. I looked over at him. He wasn't angry, just tired in a way I hadn't seen before. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet, they'd come around. Give it back. Apologize. They weren't planning to. He said it like a fact. Not cruel, just clear. Then he looked straight at me. You did the right thing. You kept your dignity, and when it counted, you told the truth. That car was just a thing. But what they did, what they tried to erase, that was your voice. I didn't know what to say to that. I'd spent months blaming myself for not being louder, for not fighting harder. But now, sitting here, I realized I had waited not out of weakness, but because I still hoped they'd choose right without being forced. You know, Grandpa added, reaching into his shirt pocket. I kept the original paperwork just in case. He pulled out a folded envelope worn soft at the corners. Inside was the original bill of sale signed by him with my name still on it. We'll take this to the DMV first thing Monday. Together. I took the paper, gently holding it like something fragile. Thank you. He smiled. Not the proud grin from the barbecue, but something quieter, wiser. You didn't ask for a fight. You just wanted what was already yours. That's not selfish. That's fair. That's when I understood the real gift wasn't the car. It was that someone in my family finally saw me as capable and didn't need me to prove it twice. The Department of Licensing was quieter than I expected. A few people sat slumped in plastic chairs, waiting for their numbers to be called. Somewhere in the background, a baby cried, and someone's Bluetooth speaker buzzed faintly. Grandpa stood beside me at the counter, arms folded across his chest, his expression unreadable. He had insisted on wearing a button-down, and Slack said government offices still deserved respect, even if the lines didn't. You've got everything, he asked. I nodded, holding the manila folder close to my chest. Inside was the bill of sale, the title, the insurance denial, and his letter confirming the gift. I had gone over every page the night before twice. The clerk at the counter was young, barely out of high school. She skimmed the document's eyes, darting between the names. So we're reassigning this vehicle to Miss Alexis Carter. Correct? Grandpa said before I could answer. She asked for signatures. I handed over my ID. Grandpa signed the affidavit. I did too. And just like that, my name was back where it belonged. The new title would come in the mail within 2 weeks. That's it, I asked, almost surprised. Sometimes things don't need to be dramatic, he said. Just done. We walked back to his truck. He held the door open for me like he always did when I was little. This time, I didn't argue. Afterward, we stopped at a diner down the road. Formica tables, cracked vinyl booths, the smell of bacon and burnt coffee baked into the walls. He ordered black coffee and eggs over easy. I got pancakes and orange juice, though I barely touched them. For the first few minutes, we didn't talk. Then he reached across the table and set the folded gift note between us. The one that had been in the glove box. I held on to this too, he said. Didn't feel right until today. I opened it slowly. Same handwriting, same words. So you can go wherever you want on your own terms. This time I believed it. The keys felt different in my hand this time. I didn't rush. I slid into the driver's seat, adjusted the mirrors, ran my hand once across the steering wheel. The seat was back in the right place now. I didn't have to ask anyone's permission to move it. The garage door opened slow with that familiar metal groan. Sunlight spilled in, touching the hood like it recognized me again. I started the engine. It turned over on the first try. Steady and warm. I didn't call anyone. Didn't take a picture. Didn't send an update. There was no announcement to make no one I needed to prove anything to. I just backed out of the driveway, rolled down the window, and let the wind touch my face. The neighborhood looked the same. Mowed lawns, dogs barking, someone grilling 2 houses down. But I wasn't the same girl who stood outside this car for months wondering what she'd done wrong. I turned onto the main road, took the long way home. No destination, just motion. Just the hum beneath me that said, "This is yours." I didn't blast music. I didn't cry. I didn't rehearse what I'd say if someone asked what happened because no one needed to ask. Somewhere between the second light and the curve past the old church, I exhaled. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a win. It wasn't even closure. It was something quieter. Something like return. No apology. No ceremony. Just the keys. Alexis learns that her voice and truth are worth defending even against those closest to her. The car, a symbol of her independence, was taken not because she was incapable, but because her capability threatened others' control. Through confronting her parents' deception with evidence and her grandfather's support, she realizes that waiting for fairness isn't weakness, it's hope. But when hope is betrayed, speaking out reclaims what's hers. The real gift isn't the car. It's the understanding that her dignity and agency are hers to protect no matter who tries to rewrite her story.
The worst day of your life rarely announces itself in advance. Mine came on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday in September 2019, wrapped in morning fog and the smell of coffee from the break room. I was running late for a meeting, taking the stairs 2 at a time because the elevator was out of order again. I remember checking my phone, seeing a text from my younger sister Olivia about our mom's upcoming birthday dinner. Then nothing. I woke up 2 weeks later in the ICU, my body feeling simultaneously numb and on fire. The doctors explained what happened in careful, measured tones. I had slipped on the stairs, tumbled down 3 flights. My spine had taken the brunt of the impact. The word paralyzed floated through the air like a toxic cloud, settling heavily in my lungs. T10 complete spinal cord injury. Paralysis from the waist down. Permanent. I'm Alexandra Reeves, Alex to friends and family, and at 32 my life as I knew it ended on those stairs. Before the accident I was a rising star at my architectural firm, known for climbing construction scaffolding in heels to inspect project details personally. I ran marathons, went rock climbing on weekends and had just started training for a triathlon. Now I couldn't even feel my legs. The first few days after regaining consciousness passed in a morphine-hazed blur. My parents were there, Mom crying silently in the corner while Dad spoke in hushed tones with doctors. Olivia came by once, her designer handbag clutched tight against her chest like a shield, as if paralysis might be contagious. My brother Ryan, always the practical one, asked about insurance coverage and long-term care costs. "Don't worry about money," Dad said, patting my hand awkwardly. "We'll figure something out." But I saw the worry lines deepening on his forehead as he looked over the medical bills. Mom's tears grew more frequent, especially when the doctor started talking about rehabilitation facilities and lifetime care requirements. Olivia's visits became shorter, always preceded by excuses about her busy schedule at the law firm. Ryan stopped coming altogether, sending generic, "get well" texts instead. The shift was subtle at first. My parents would consult with doctors without including me in the conversations. Decisions about my care were made over my head, as if the injury had somehow rendered me incapable of rational thought. When I tried to discuss my options for returning to work eventually, Mom would change the subject and Dad would suddenly remember an urgent appointment. "We just want what's best for you, sweetie," Mom would say, smoothing my hair back like she did when I was a child. But her eyes never quite met mine. Then came the day they suggested I move to Pine Grove Care Center, a long-term facility on the outskirts of town. I'd heard about Pine Grove. It was where families sent relatives they didn't want to deal with anymore. The place where people went to be forgotten. It's a very nice facility, Mom said, her voice artificially bright. They have excellent care programs and it would be easier for everyone. Easier for whom? I interrupted, my voice hoarse from disuse. For you. So you don't have to look at your broken daughter anymore. Alex, don't be dramatic, Ryan chimed in from his corner of the hospital room. This is a practical solution. None of us are equipped to provide the care you need. I don't need to be cared for, I snapped. I need rehabilitation, therapy, and support to rebuild my life. I'm paralyzed, not dying. But honey, Mom's voice quavered, your apartment isn't accessible, your job. I can modify my apartment. I can work remotely until the office installs proper accommodations. I've already talked to HR. Always so stubborn, Dad sighed, shaking his head. This isn't the time for pride, Alex. You need to accept your new limitations. The way he said limitations made my skin crawl. Like I was somehow less than human now, less than the daughter he'd raised to never take no for an answer. Get out. The words came out barely above a whisper. What? Mom's hand flew to her throat, her signature pearl necklace clicking softly. Get out. All of you. Now. Alex, be reasonable, Ryan started, but I cut him off. Reasonable? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want me to be reasonable while you try to ship me off to a care home to rot? While you make decisions about my life as if I'm not even in the room. I said get out. They left, Mom crying quietly, Dad's face set in disappointed lines, Ryan muttering about ingratitude. Olivia hadn't even bothered to show up for this family meeting. That night, lying in my hospital bed, I made a decision. If my family couldn't see me as the same person I'd always been, just with different mobility needs, then I would rebuild my life without them. I spent the next few hours making calls, to my insurance company, to disability advocates, to lawyers specializing in workplace accommodation. By morning I had a plan. My savings, combined with my insurance coverage, would cover the immediate medical expenses and necessary home modifications. My firm's HR department was surprisingly supportive, agreeing to temporary remote work and promising to fast-track accessibility improvements to the office. The real surprise came from an unexpected source. My neighbor, Mrs. Chin, the retired physical therapist who lived across the hall, showed up at the hospital with homemade soup and a determined expression. I hear your family being foolish, she said, her accent thickening with emotion. You stay with me when you leave hospital. My apartment already has wide doors, grab bars from when Henry was sick. We make it work. I tried to protest, but Mrs. Chin waved away my objections like irritating flies. I know rehabilitation exercises. I help you get strong again. No argument. When my family returned the next day, armed with Pine Grove brochures and concerned expressions, I was ready. I've made arrangements, I told them, my voice steady. I'm not going to Pine Grove. I'm going to stay with Mrs. Chin while my apartment is being modified. I'll be starting outpatient rehabilitation next week, and I'll return to work part-time in 3 months. But Alex, Mom began, her voice trembling. You can't possibly. I am. And I don't need your permission or approval. This is a mistake, Dad said, his businessman's facade cracking slightly. You're being unreasonable, throwing away our help. Help. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. You call trying to warehouse me in a care facility help? You haven't asked me once what I want, what I need. You just decided I was too broken to have a say in my own life. We're your family, Ryan interjected. We're trying to do what's best for you. No, I said quietly. You're trying to do what's easiest for you. And that's fine. I get it. This isn't what any of us planned. But I'm still me. Still the same stubborn, determined person I've always been. If you can't see that, can't support that, then maybe we need some space. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom started to cry again. She'd been doing that a lot lately, and Dad's face hardened into the expression he usually reserved for difficult business negotiations. If that's how you feel, he said stiffly, perhaps some space would be best. Until you come to your senses. They left shortly after, Mom kissing my forehead with trembling lips, Dad nodding curtly, Ryan muttering something about calling later. Olivia sent a text that evening. They told me what happened. Sorry you're being difficult about this. Call when you're ready to be reasonable. I deleted the message without responding. The next few months were the hardest of my life. Learning to navigate the world from a wheelchair, rebuilding my upper body strength, figuring out new ways to do the simplest tasks. It was exhausting, frustrating, and sometimes terrifying. But Mrs. Chin was there every step of the way, her encouragement unwavering, her tough love exactly what I needed. No self-pity, she would say when I got discouraged. You want to cry? Cry while doing exercises. Multitask. My colleagues surprised me too. They set up a rotation of meal deliveries, helped with grocery shopping, and even organized a weekend work party to help modify my apartment once I was ready to move back in. The building manager, inspired by their efforts, fast-tracked the installation of automatic doors and ramps. My family's response to all this? Silence. Complete radio silence. Mom stopped calling. Dad's birthday card came with a check, his solution to everything, but no personal message. Olivia got married that spring. I learned about it from Facebook. Ryan's wife had another baby. I got a birth announcement in the mail, 2 weeks after everyone else had already met my new nephew. The holidays were the hardest. That first Christmas, I sat in my newly adapted apartment, surrounded by cards and gifts from colleagues and friends, but nothing from my family except another impersonal check from Dad. Mrs. Chin insisted I join her family's celebration, but I couldn't help noticing my mother's social media posts about the perfect family gathering, pictures of everyone around the dinner table, smiling as if the empty chair where I should have been didn't even exist. Life went on. I returned to work, first remotely, then part-time in the office once the accessibility modifications were complete. My colleagues' initial awkwardness faded as they realized I was still the same demanding, detail-oriented architect I'd always been, just sitting instead of standing. I got promoted to senior project manager, started mentoring junior architects, and even began specializing in universal design principles, turning my new perspective into a professional advantage. I made new friends through adaptive sports programs, learned to drive with hand controls, and slowly built a life that looked different from my old one but was no less fulfilling. Mrs. Chin moved in with her daughter in California, but we stayed in touch through weekly video calls where she continued to boss me around about my exercises. 3 years passed this way. 3 years of rebuilding, adapting, growing, and complete estrangement from my family. I heard bits and pieces through mutual acquaintances. Olivia made partner at her law firm, Ryan's business was expanding, Mom and Dad bought a vacation home in Florida. Life went on for them too, apparently unburdened by thoughts of their inconvenient eldest daughter. Then on a rainy Tuesday in October 2022, almost exactly 3 years after my accident, my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in ages. Home. Mom's number. I stared at it for a long moment, debating whether to answer. In the end, curiosity won out. Hello. Alex. Mom's voice sounded strange, choked. We need to talk. Can we come see you? We. Your father and I. And Ryan. It's important. Something in her tone made my stomach clench. What's wrong? A pause, then. It's about Ryan's son. Tommy. He's very sick, Alex. We need your help. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken implications. After 3 years of silence, they needed something from me. Something important enough to break the wall of silence they'd built. Come over tomorrow, I heard myself say. 7 o'clock. I hung up before she could respond, my mind already racing with possibilities. What could be so urgent that they'd reach out now? What kind of help could they possibly want from the daughter they'd written off as too broken to be part of their perfect family? I didn't sleep much that night, memories and questions chasing each other through my mind. By morning, I had convinced myself that whatever they wanted, I would listen calmly, respond rationally, and maintain the emotional boundaries I'd worked so hard to build. I had no idea how wrong I was. 7 o'clock brought the sound of hesitant knocking at my door. I wheeled myself over, took a deep breath, and opened it to find my family huddled in the hallway like uncertain strangers. Mom looked older than I remembered, new lines etched around her mouth. Dad's hair had gone completely gray. Ryan stood slightly behind them, his usual confident posture replaced by something approaching defeat. Come in, I said, backing up to give them space. I watched their eyes dart around my apartment, taking in the modifications I'd made over the years. The lowered countertops in the kitchen, the wide open spaces between furniture, the sleek hand controls that allowed me to operate everything from lights to temperature. Mom's gaze lingered on my wheelchair, a high-end carbon fiber model I'd saved up to buy, before quickly looking away. You've done well with the place, Dad said awkwardly, settling onto my couch. Yes, I have. I positioned myself across from them, maintaining eye contact. Now what's this about Tommy? Ryan cleared his throat, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. Tommy's kidneys are failing, he said, his voice rough. Both of them. He needs a transplant. My heart clenched. Tommy was only 5, the same age I'd been when Ryan used to carry me on his shoulders, before success and ambition had turned him into a stranger. I'm sorry to hear that, I said carefully. But I don't understand what this has to do with me. Mom leaned forward, her hands twisting in her lap. We've all been tested, your father, me, Ryan and Sarah, even Olivia. None of us are compatible matches. The pieces started clicking into place. And you think I might be? The doctors say siblings often have the highest chance of compatibility, Dad explained, slipping into his business presentation voice. And given your condition, you're the most likely to be able to spare a kidney without impacting your quality of life. The words hit me like a physical blow. Given my condition, my quality of life, the same life they deemed too difficult to be part of 3 years ago. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice eerily calm. You haven't spoken to me in 3 years. You dropped me from your lives when I needed you most. And now you want one of my organs. Alex, please, Ryan's voice cracked. He's my son, your nephew. You've never even met him, but whose fault is that? I cut in. Who decided I wasn't fit to be around their children? Who stopped inviting me to family gatherings? Who pretended I didn't exist until they needed something from me? We made mistakes, Mom whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. We were wrong. We were scared and didn't know how to handle me. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I wasn't a problem to be handled, Mom. I was your daughter. I needed my family. Instead, you tried to warehouse me in a care facility and walked away when I refused to disappear quietly. That's not fair, Dad protested. We were trying to do what was best. For whom? I demanded. Best for you? Best for your country club image? Heaven forbid anyone know perfect Patricia and Richard Reeves had a disabled daughter who refused to be hidden away. The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan had dropped his head into his hands. Mom was crying openly now, and Dad looked like he'd aged another decade in the last 5 minutes. You're right, he said finally, his voice heavy. We failed you. Completely and utterly failed you. The simple admission, something I'd waited 3 years to hear, hit harder than any argument could have. I wheeled myself to my desk and pulled out a manila envelope I'd been saving for years. Before we go any further, there's something you need to see. Inside was a letter, the paper slightly yellowed with age. I handed it to Dad, watching his face as he read. What is this? He asked, his voice shaking. A letter from Dr. Matthews, the head of neurology at County General. Dated 1 week after my accident. I knew the contents by heart. It details how you and Mom came to him asking about ways to have me declared mentally incompetent. How you wanted legal authority to force me into long-term care against my wishes. Mom gasped. Ryan's head snapped up. You knew. Dad's hands were trembling. Dr. Matthews believed in patient autonomy. He refused to help you and thought I should know what you'd tried to do. I wheeled closer, my voice steady. That's why I refused Pine Grove. That's why I cut contact. Not because I was being stubborn or difficult, but because you tried to take away my right to make decisions about my own life. The silence stretched out, broken only by Mom's quiet sobs. I didn't know, Ryan said finally, about any of this. I swear, Alex. Would it have made a difference? I asked. You still walked away. You still kept your children from knowing their aunt existed. He had no answer for that. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I'll get tested. Their heads snapped up in unison. You will. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Not for you, I clarified. For Tommy. He's innocent in all this. But I have conditions. Dad straightened, falling back on familiar negotiation territory. Name them. First, if I'm a match and decide to donate, it's my choice. No pressure, no guilt trips, no manipulation. They nodded quickly. Second, I want access to all of Tommy's medical records and direct communication with his doctors. I make my own informed decision. Of course, Ryan agreed immediately. Third, I paused, making sure I had their full attention. If I do this, we deal with the past. All of it. No more pretending. No more hiding. You acknowledge what you did publicly if I ask. And we get counseling as a family. Mom started to speak, but Dad touched her arm, silencing her. Agreed, he said quietly. All of it. Last condition. I met each of their eyes in turn. Whether I'm a match or not, whether I donate or not, you never, ever try to make medical decisions for me again. I am not incompetent. I am not broken. I am not a problem to be solved. I'm your daughter, your sister, your family wheelchair and all. Take it or leave it. The moment stretched out, heavy with 3 years of unspoken words and untold hurts. Then Ryan stood up, walked over to my wheelchair and knelt down so we were at eye level. I'm sorry, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I'm sorry I wasn't the brother you deserved. I'm sorry I let fear and discomfort make me forget who you are, the strongest, most determined person I've ever known. Whatever you decide about the transplant, I want my kids to know their aunt. The real you, not the silence we've hidden behind. One by one they agreed to my terms. Mom was still crying, but the tears felt different now, cleansing rather than manipulative. Dad looked both older and somehow lighter, as if setting down a heavy burden he'd carried for years. The testing process took weeks. Countless blood draws, tissue typing, cross-match tests. I met Tommy during this time, a bright, curious 5-year-old who seemed fascinated by my wheelchair and asked endless questions about how it worked. He didn't see me as broken or different. He just saw his aunt who could do awesome wheelies, and let him ride on her lap around the hospital corridors. The results when they came were both a relief and a new challenge. I was a match. A good one. The decision wasn't easy. I spent long hours talking with my doctors, with Mrs. Chin, who offered to fly back from California to help with my recovery, and with my therapist. I read everything I could about living kidney donation, about risks and recovery times, about long-term outcomes. In the end, though, the choice was clear. Not because my family had earned it, we were still working through that with weekly counseling sessions that often left us all emotionally drained. Not because I'd forgiven them completely, that would take more time and more work on their part. I chose to donate because of Tommy's laugh when I showed him how to pop a wheelie. Because of the way he looked at me with pure love, untainted by the prejudices and fears that had driven my family's actions. Because sometimes the greatest revenge against those who underestimated you is to be bigger, better, more generous than they ever thought possible. The surgery was scheduled for spring. During my recovery, something unexpected happened. My family stepped up. Not out of guilt or obligation, but with genuine care and understanding. Mom learned about proper transfer techniques and post-operative care for someone with paraplegia. Dad modified his beach house to be fully accessible. Olivia, who hadn't been part of the initial kidney conversation, flew in from New York to help coordinate my care team. They weren't perfect. Old habits sometimes surfaced. Mom still occasionally slipped into her nervous hovering. Dad still sometimes talked about me like I wasn't in the room. But they caught themselves, apologized, did better. The counseling helped, forcing us to address not just the past 3 years, but patterns that had existed long before my accident. Today, 6 months post-surgery, I'm watching Tommy chase his sister around my backyard. The incision scars have faded, but the changes in my family haven't. Mom calls every Sunday not to check if I need anything, but to actually talk about work, about life, about the adaptive skiing program I'm thinking of trying. Dad proudly shows off pictures of my latest architectural projects at his club, wheelchair visible in my professional headshot. Ryan brings the kids over weekly for movie nights, and Olivia has started consulting me on disability rights cases at her firm. We're not the perfect family we used to pretend to be. We're something better. A real family with real challenges, real conflicts, and real growth. A family that learned the hard way that strength comes in many forms, that disability doesn't equal inability, and that sometimes the greatest gifts come from facing our deepest failures. I'm Alexandra Reeves, architect, aunt, kidney donor, paraplegic, and finally, undeniably, unapologetically myself. My wheelchair hasn't changed who I am, it just changed how I move through the world. And sometimes when Tommy rides on my lap asking about building designs or wheelchair mechanics, I think maybe that world is becoming a little bit better, a little bit more understanding, one small soul at a time. The other day I overheard him at school, proudly telling his friends about his awesome Aunt Alex, who designs buildings and does wheelies and saved my life. No mention of disability, no hint of the drama that preceded his transplant. Just pure love and admiration. And really, isn't that the best revenge of all? They say every cloud has a silver lining. But as I sat in my car outside Le Chateau Grand, watching valets park Bentleys and Rolls-Royces, I wondered if sometimes the silver lining is actually just the glint of a knife about to fall. I'm Madeline Foster, Maddie to my friends, the plain one to my family. At 29, I'm a successful pediatric nurse who spends more time in scrubs than stilettos. My sister Victoria, on the other hand, is the living embodiment of our mother's beauty queen ambitions, right down to her Miss California runner-up crown. The invitation to Victoria's wedding had arrived 6 months ago, all cream-colored linen and gold embossing. The wedding of the year, the society pages called it. Victoria Foster, social media influencer and beauty entrepreneur, marrying James Richardson III, heir to the Richardson real estate empire. 25 bridesmaids, $1 million flower budget, and a guest list that read like a who's who of West Coast elite. I wasn't supposed to be here today. In fact, I had been explicitly uninvited 3 weeks ago. Darling, Mom had said during our weekly family dinner, her voice dripping with practiced concern, Victoria feels that perhaps it would be best if you didn't attend the wedding. I'd looked up from my pot roast, fork frozen halfway to my mouth. What? It's just. Mom glanced at Victoria, who was tapping away on her phone, perfectly manicured nails clicking against the screen. The aesthetics are very important to her. The photos will be in all the major magazines. And? I prompted, though I already knew where this was going. It was high school yearbook photos all over again, when Mom had suggested I be conveniently sick on picture day. Victoria finally looked up, sighing as if the whole conversation was beneath her. You don't exactly fit the vision, Maddie. I mean, look at you. I had looked down at myself, simple black sweater, minimal makeup, hair in its usual practical bob. Nothing wrong with my appearance, just nothing that would fit into Victoria's Instagram perfect world. You're disinviting me from your wedding because I'm not pretty enough? The words tasted bitter. Don't be dramatic, Victoria rolled her eyes. I'm disinviting you because you refuse to make an effort. My wedding photos will be seen by millions of followers. Everything has to be perfect. Dad had remained silent, hiding behind his newspaper like he always did during family conflicts. His silence hurt more than Victoria's words. I'd left dinner early that night, driving home through tears I refused to let fall in front of them. But fate, it seems, had other plans for me. 2 days later, a young woman came into the pediatric ward where I worked. She was maybe 25, pretty in a tired way with a sleeping toddler on her hip. She looked lost, so I approached to help. I'm looking for the children's clinic, she said, shifting the sleeping child. My son needs his vaccinations updated for preschool. That's 2 floors down, I smiled, reaching for my ID badge to escort her. I can show you. That's when I saw it. The photo she used as her phone's lock screen wallpaper. It showed her in a white sundress, standing next to a man I knew very well, James Richardson III. My sister's fiancé. The woman, Maria, broke down when I gently questioned her. As she was married to James. Had been for 3 years. Their son Jamie Jr. was 2. James had told her he was working in Asia, managing his family's international properties. She'd had no idea he was in the country, let alone engaged to someone else. I found out from Instagram, she whispered, showing me Victoria's latest wedding preparation post. Someone tagged him in a comment. I've been trying to reach him, his family, anyone, but they've all blocked me. I stayed late that night helping Maria document everything. Their marriage certificate, Jamie's birth certificate, photos, text messages, bank statements showing James's monthly deposits to their joint account. Everything that proved James Richardson III wasn't just a cheating fiancé. He was a bigamist about to commit fraud. What are you going to do? I asked as she gathered her papers. Maria straightened her shoulders, looking more determined than defeated now. I'm going to stop this wedding. My son deserves to know his father isn't a ghost who only exists in photos and monthly deposits. I should have walked away then. Should have let Maria handle it herself. But something in me, maybe years of being the family disappointment, maybe simple justice, made me reach for my phone. I think I can help, I said, showing her Victoria's wedding invitation. And I know exactly when and where to find them all. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Maria and I met regularly, planning every detail. I helped her find a lawyer who specialized in family law. We documented everything, created backup copies, prepared for every possible scenario. What we didn't expect was to find more women. They came forward one by one, discovered through careful investigation and discreet inquiries. No other wives, thankfully, but a string of fiancés across multiple states. Each engagement had ended mysteriously just before the wedding, usually after James had borrowed significant sums of money for various business ventures. "He's a con man," Maria's lawyer explained, reviewing the growing file of evidence. "He picks wealthy women, love bombs them, then disappears with their money before the wedding. The only reason he actually married Maria was because of the baby, and because her family's wealth was tied up in trusts he couldn't access without a legal marriage." "And my sister?" I asked, thinking of Victoria's massive Instagram following, her successful beauty brand, her carefully curated image of perfection. Based on the pattern, he'll take her money and disappear. Probably blame it on business troubles, make her too embarrassed to admit she was conned. I thought about showing Victoria the evidence then, about trying to warn her. But I remembered all the times she'd dismissed my concerns about anything, my career choice. "Ugh, why would you want to wear scrubs all day? My relationships. No wonder you're single, you don't even contour. My whole existence. It's like you're trying to embarrass the family." No, Victoria wouldn't believe me. She'd accuse me of jealousy, of trying to ruin her perfect day. She needed to see the truth for herself in a way she couldn't deny or dismiss. Which is how I found myself sitting in my car outside Le Chateau Grand on my sister's wedding day, watching the arrival of guests who thought they were there to witness a fairy tale. Maria sat beside me, wearing one of the designer dresses we'd carefully chosen for this moment. In the back seat, Jamie Jr. slept peacefully in his car seat, unaware he was about to meet his father. "Are you sure about this?" Maria asked, smoothing her dress nervously. "Once we go in, there's no turning back." I thought about Victoria's cruel dismissal, about James's calculated deceptions, about all the women whose lives he'd upended. I thought about my father's silence and my mother's constant disappointment. "Yes," I said, reaching for my purse where Maria's documentation waited. "It's time for everyone to see the truth. No filters, no perfect angles, just reality in all its messy glory." We stepped out of the car, straightening our spines and lifting our chins. The valet rushed forward, expecting yet another wealthy guest arriving for the society wedding of the year. If only he knew what was really about to unfold. I handed him my keys, then helped Maria get Jamie out of his car seat. The little boy had woken up, his eyes wide as he took in the grand building decorated with thousands of white roses, Victoria's signature flower. "Ready?" I asked Maria, adjusting my own carefully chosen outfit, not the demure beige my mother had suggested to help me blend into the background, but a deep red that demanded attention. Maria nodded, shifting Jamie to her hip. "Ready." As we walked toward the entrance, I caught our reflection in the polished windows. We didn't look like people about to ruin a wedding. We looked like justice, dressed in designer clothes and armed with undeniable truth. Victoria had wanted perfect wedding photos. Well, these weren't the kind of photos she'd planned, but they would certainly be memorable. I pushed open the heavy doors, hearing the string quartet playing inside. The ceremony wouldn't start for another hour, plenty of time for what we had planned. "Madeline." My mother's voice rang out across the marble foyer. "What are you doing here? And who is?" Her voice trailed off as she caught sight of Jamie, his features a perfect miniature of James Richardson III. I smiled, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "Oh, Mother. I brought some unexpected guests to Victoria's wedding. I think everyone needs to meet them." Part 2. The next few minutes unfolded like a scene from a movie I couldn't pause. Mom's face cycled through emotions: shock, denial, anger, fear as her perfect wedding plans began to crumble around her. "Security," she called out, her voice shrill. "We need security." "I wouldn't do that if I were you," I said calmly, opening my purse to reveal the stack of documents. "Unless you want to explain to all your society friends why you're having the groom's legal wife and child removed from the premises." The word legal hit her like a physical blow. She staggered slightly, grabbing a nearby chair for support. "What are you talking about?" "Perhaps we should take this somewhere private," I suggested, nodding toward the growing crowd of curious guests. "The bridal suite, maybe?" I'm sure Victoria would want to hear this too. Mom's survival instincts kicked in, the same ones that had helped her navigate countless social disasters over the years. She plastered on a smile for the onlookers. "Of course, darling. Just a small family matter to sort out before the ceremony. The bridal suite was a scene of controlled chaos when we entered. Hairstylists, makeup artists, and photographers buzzed around Victoria, who sat in a throne-like chair being attended to like a queen preparing for coronation. Her wedding dress, a custom creation that cost more than my annual salary, spread around her in waves of silk and lace. She caught sight of us in the mirror and her face darkened. "What is she doing here?" "I told you, Dash." The words died in her throat as she saw Jamie. Even through layers of professional makeup, I could see the blood drain from her face. "Everyone out," Mom ordered, her society smile never wavering. "Now." The various vendors scattered, leaving just our family, Maria and little Jamie, who was looking around the ornate room with wide-eyed wonder. "Who are they?" Victoria demanded, but her voice trembled. I think she already knew. Maria stepped forward, her chin high. "I'm Maria Richardson. This is Jamie Jr. And James, your fiancé, is my husband." The silence that followed was absolute. "You're lying," Victoria whispered, but her eyes were fixed on Jamie's face, on the features so identical to James's that no one could deny the relationship. Wordlessly, I began laying out the documents on a nearby table. Marriage certificate, birth certificate, photos, bank statements, the additional evidence from other women James had conned. "It's all here," I said quietly. "Everything. And there's more, a whole pattern of cons and fraud across multiple states. James Richardson III isn't just a bigamist. He's a professional con man who targets wealthy women." Victoria lunged for the documents, her perfectly manicured hands shaking as she read. Mom peered over her shoulder, her face growing paler with each page. "No," Victoria kept muttering. "No, no, no. This isn't happening. Not to me. Not today." "I'm sorry," Maria said, and I could hear the genuine sympathy in her voice. "I didn't want to do it this way, but we tried contacting you, his family, everyone. All our calls were blocked, our emails filtered. Because James told us you were a crazy ex trying to extort money." Victoria screamed, her composure finally shattering. "He explained everything." "I'm sure he did," I said. "Just like he explained things to the other women. Would you like to read their statements too?" Victoria's eyes snapped to mine. "You," she hissed. "You did this. You couldn't stand that I was having the perfect wedding, that I was going to be happy dash." "Happy?" I cut in. "You think being conned out of your money and left humiliated would make you happy? He's already started, hasn't he? Asked for investments in his new projects? Emergency loans for business opportunities." The way she flinched told me I was right. "How much?" Mom asked, her voice hollow. Victoria wouldn't meet her eyes. "2 million, she whispered. "From my company's operating accounts. He said he'd double it within a month." "Just like he told the others," Maria said gently. "That's his pattern. The wedding is always the last step, one final big score before he disappears." The door burst open and Dad rushed in, his face flushed. "What's going on?" "The guests are getting restless and James is asking Dash." He stopped short at the scene before him. Victoria crying in her wedding dress, Mom collapsed in a chair, and a toddler who looked exactly like his almost son-in-law playing quietly in the corner. "Oh God," he breathed, taking in the documents spread across the table. "Oh God. Mr. Foster?" A wedding planner poked her head in. "The groom is asking if there's a problem. Should we delay the ceremony?" Before anyone could respond, heavy footsteps approached. Then James's voice. "What's the holdup? We need to start soon if we want to catch the sunset for photos dash." He appeared in the doorway, handsome in his custom tuxedo. His practiced smile froze as he took in the scene, particularly Maria and Jamie. "Security," he bellowed, recovering quickly. "Someone call security. This woman is a stalker, she's been harassing my family dash." "Save it, James," I said, stepping forward. "Or should I say David Wilson? Or Michael Brooks? Or any of the other names you've used to con women across the country?" He took a step back, eyes darting between faces, calculating odds like the professional con man he was. "Victoria, baby, don't listen to them. Your sister's just jealous, trying to ruin our special day dash." "Daddy." Jamie's small voice cut through the tension. He had wandered over to James, looking up at him with pure innocence. "Mama said I finally get to meet you." The resemblance was undeniable. Several guests had gathered in the hallway, murmuring as they watched the scene unfold. James's face went from red to white to a sickly gray. Then he ran. He didn't get far. The police officers Maria's lawyer had stationed outside were waiting. We could hear the commotion as he was arrested, the shouts, the accusations, the growing crowd of shocked guests. Victoria crumpled to the floor, her $1 million dress pooling around her like broken dreams. $2 million, she kept whispering. My company, my reputation. I knelt beside her, not caring that my red dress was getting crushed. We can fix this. Maria's lawyer knows exactly how he operates. We can track the money, press charges, protect your business before he can transfer the funds. Why? She looked at me, mascara tracking down her cheeks. Why did you do this? Why didn't you just let me marry him and be happy? Because you're my sister, I said simply. And even when you're cruel to me, even when you cut me out of your life, I still love you enough to save you from disaster. She stared at me for a long moment, then did something she hadn't done since we were children. She hugged me. The aftermath was chaos, of course. The wedding was cancelled. Guests sent home with elaborate gift bags and carefully worded explanations. Victoria's social media exploded with speculation and rumors, but Maria's lawyer helped craft a statement that positioned her as another victim of a sophisticated con man rather than a jilted bride. The press had a field day when James's, or whatever his real name was, full history came to light. More victims came forward, each story adding to the criminal charges. Victoria's money was recovered before he could transfer it offshore, and her company survived, though she had to work hard to rebuild her followers' trust. Mom and Dad struggled with the humiliation, but somewhere in the aftermath our family dynamics shifted. Maybe it was the shared trauma, or maybe they finally saw me clearly, not as the plain daughter who didn't fit their image, but as the strong one who had protected her sister despite years of rejection. I was wrong, Mom said one evening months later as we sat in my apartment having coffee. All these years I pushed you both to focus on appearances, on fitting some perfect image. But you were the one who saw what really mattered. Victoria changed too. The failed wedding seemed to crack her perfect facade, letting something more real emerge. She scaled back her influencer activities, focused on developing skincare products for burn survivors and cancer patients, and started volunteering at my hospital's pediatric ward. You know what's funny? She said during one of her volunteer shifts. I used to think you were the plain one. But watching you with these kids, seeing how you light up when you help someone, you're actually radiant. Maria and Jamie became part of our lives in an unexpected way. Victoria, after some initial awkwardness, formed a genuine friendship with Maria, bonding over their shared experience of James's deception. Jamie called us both Auntie, bringing a joy to family gatherings that no perfectly filtered photo could ever capture. A year later, Victoria met someone new, a pediatric surgeon from my hospital. No massive social media announcement, no $1 million wedding plans. Just quiet dinners, genuine conversations, and a growing relationship built on truth rather than image. He likes me even without makeup, she marveled one day. Like actually prefers when I'm just being natural. Imagine that, I teased. Someone loving you for who you are instead of who you pretend to be. She threw a pillow at me, laughing, a real laugh, not the practiced social media giggle she'd perfected over the years. The biggest surprise came at their small, intimate wedding 6 months later. Victoria asked me to be her maid of honor, and this time, there were no comments about my appearance, no suggestions about extensive makeovers. Wear whatever makes you feel beautiful, she said. The photos will be perfect because they'll be real. Standing beside her at the altar in a simple blue dress I'd chosen myself, I thought about that day at Le Chateau Grand. About how sometimes the most loving thing you can do is shatter someone's perfect illusions to save them from real disaster. About how strength doesn't always look like what we expect. Mom caught my eye during the reception, raising her glass in a subtle toast. She'd finally stopped trying to remake me in Victoria's image, accepting that her daughters could be beautiful in different ways. You know, Victoria said later as we watched Jamie chase bubbles across the dance floor, I never thanked you properly. For saving me that day. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. He squeezed my hand. You risked everything, my hatred, the family's rejection, your own reputation, to protect me. That's real love, isn't it? Not the filtered, perfect kind, but the messy, complicated, honest kind. I looked around at our gathered family, Mom and Dad dancing slowly, Maria laughing with Victoria's new husband, Jamie showing off his bow tie to anyone who would look. None of it was Instagram perfect. There were wrinkles in dresses, flyaway hairs, smudged makeup from happy tears. But it was real. And real, I've learned, is better than perfect any day.